Persona 5 Royal and its two endings are definitely something people still talk about today. Just a month ago, I asked viewers on this channel if they felt even a little conflicted about rejecting Maruki World where no one suffers, and over 14,000 of you voted. So in this video, I thought it would be fun to cover some of the responses from the poll and share my thought on them. The world without pains means there is no growth. Without challenges, there is no purpose. Suffering breeds progress. This has to be one, if not the most popular point, and it is the one that came directly from the game. It's the point the Phantom Thief were trying to make. That pains and suffering, though painful, help us grow and therefore have meaning. I wholeheartedly agree with this, and this might very well be the end of the video, but the reason I made this video is to share my perspective and explore these texts further from multiple angles. So although I agree, I must say many people amp this up by 1000%. First, Maruki did mention a world with no suffering, but he did not mention a world without pain. This likely means that growth still exists, at least the everyday kind. For example, if you go to the gym and work out, you can still gain muscle. You'll still be bad at trade like art, but through practice, you can grow and get better. What Maruki seeks to get rid of isn't those type of pain, but rather extreme suffering such as trauma. However, somewhere in the story, this was blurred into suffering and hardship, which is much harder to identify because everyone sees hardship and suffering differently. What I'm trying to say is that the level at which one would call something hardship or suffering varies compared to trauma, which is much more clearly defined. That said, while this is a wonderful observation and spin on something like pain, I want to say that it doesn't make pain amazing, but what it does is give it value. Imagine this, if pain helps people grow and we champion this growth above all else, it would not be hard to run into the mindset of we should force people to endure some level of pain despite them wanting it or not. And I'm sure there is some merit to that to a certain extent. However, if I amp up the pain level to the level that it might create trauma or chronic depression, I would assume the number of people agreeing with the method would slowly reduce. I mean, I would think we want people to get stronger naturally without having to put them into a near-death experience to activate their Senkai boost every time. Which brings us to the next point. Yes, suffering makes you stronger, but if there aren't any hardship left in the world, do you ever need to be strong? This is a great question. It essentially asks us to step back and ask ourselves, why do we need to be strong to begin with? In the most general sense, we want to be strong in this context so that we'll be able to overcome the same hardship or a similar one that might come in the future. So, in a sense, if there were to be no future hardship or suffering, there wouldn't be any need to be stronger. Again, I'm not saying this means there's no need for strength. I'm saying there's no need for greater strength beyond the mundane one we already possess. That said, when I see this comment brought up, it's often ignored or met with sidestep answer. I think this happens because it's a good point. However, there is definitely a problem with it, but I'll save that for the end because it's tied into another point I want to discuss. Maruki is twisted and evil. Well, you're definitely right to think that way, but this is also the reason why I didn't like Persona 5 Royal approach when it's come to story framing. Let me explain. One of Persona 5's greatest strengths is how it makes players feel good, whether it's through easier but satisfying combat or how it set up its stories, from introducing a new characters, showing that they are being oppressed, leading to their awakening, and finally to the defeat of their oppressor. All this is designed to give you a triumphant feeling like you did the right thing and overcame hardship. The problem with that is, in order to achieve this, the developer usually resort in emotional hand-holding, using different elements like story structure and music to tell the player how to feel. This often ends up reducing the value and dehumanizing the opposing force. In fact, a lot of you brought up a great example of this. Many of you said that seeing how Maruki treats Sumire made you change your mind. Some mentioned that after watching Maruki ending, you just knew it was bad. And yes, of course, you're going to feel that way because that's how the scene is set up. That said, I want to be clear, I'm not entirely against this style of storytelling. In fact, I do feel good when I play through Persona 5. What I'm saying though is that by doing this is poison the well, making it difficult for people to make their decision based purely on a world without suffering versus a world with it. Because now it's becomes a world with suffering, but cool people get to grow stronger, versus a world without suffering, but it's ruled by a crazy person. Which led me to the next take. Morgana asks, what about people who want to take on the world by themselves? Which is a cool line, however, I noticed some of you in the comments also asked back, but what about people who can't fight? What about people like Rumi? People who suffer from pain that can't ever be healed. I saw a few people in the comment asking this question and sharing their experiences with struggle, and to no surprise, most of the people who were more open to accepting or at least considering the Maruki world were people with chronic pains, both emotional and physical. It's easier for people who have recovered and are now happy with themselves to say they're grateful for where pain brought them, but it's important not to forget that there are also people whose pain lead them to places where they won't recover from, and some may never be truly happy the way they once were. This is another part I'm not a big fan of, the fact that the game overly triumphs the player action for rejecting Maruki world. And this will be the last time I say this in this video, but whenever I say I'm not a big fan of something, I'm not saying it's bad. The goal of the developer is very clear. Persona is designed to make player feel triumphant and morally correct, and in that regard, they succeeded. We can see that 30% of people in our poll said they felt 0% conflicted when rejecting Maruki world. Now, since Expedition 33 is very popular and likely to reach an acclaim level, I want to point out that its ending has a much better balanced moral payoff, and I hope those of you who finished both the game can help me vouch for this. Anyway, Expedition 33 still presents one ending that the dev clearly see as more righteous, but it's not a purely happy ending like Persona 5 Royal, and it's very clear to me throughout the game that the dev is trying to show us that there is no truly righteous path, just the choice that we believe is the best, and despite how we felt, there will be people who suffer from the choice we make. That said, if you want to talk about this in the comments, don't forget to spoiler tag it. The game is quite new, but I love to hear your thoughts. Now, technically, Persona 5 Royal could have made the wake of the player choice more impactful by showing more of the aftermath of rejecting Maruki worlds. They touched on this briefly with Futaba being genuinely sad after realizing she's going to lose her mother again. But I go further. Show Rumi being hospitalized again, or even show people who's, because of your choice, now must endure unbearable pain again. That said, to be fair, the game does have an answer to this, but it might not be satisfying for those whose pain was taken away and is now returning. That answer though is to be kind to others and help those who can lift themselves up. In our world, as human, we are by far the only species that build society to help those who can't help themselves. So if you choose to discard the one thing that would help those who can be helped, you owe them that much. Maruki world is a world with no free will. I saw these comments here and there, and before I go any further, I want to first say that I personally don't believe in free will. That said, despite that, I recognize the importance of it, or at least the importance of believing we have it. After all, you want people to believe they're in control of their future to a certain extent. I mean, that's much better than telling everyone that their past experiences and the chemical in their brains are what make their choices for them. So despite technically not believing in free will, in a practical sense, I'm with most people and am happy to tell others that we do possess it. That said, Maruki Worlds was never said to eliminate free will, it was only suggested to remove suffering. So where do people get this idea then? From what I understand, it's come from bits and pieces, but one of them linked to the act of humanity taking a bite of the apples in the Garden of Edens, to being the moment that gave people free will. This is related to Maruki because Apple and Garden of Edens are commonly symbolism in his art, particularly how it seemed like he's trying to make it so mankind has never taken a bite of the apple. However, that's not accurate, but I understand why some people might think so, because it's very similar to the idea that biting the apple was the first exercise of free will, which is how the story is supposed to be interpreted. I mean, think about it. If free will doesn't exist before the apple, then Adam and Eve couldn't have defied God and taking the bite. So it makes more sense that the bite itself is the proof that they already had free will. The second point comes from a story in the games where one of Yusuke's classmates gave up on becoming an artist and pursuing something else instead, something he's ended up excelling at. That said, I apologize in advance. I don't remember the exact details, but it's something along those lines. So feel free to clarify that in the comments if you want. That said, for this second point, Maruki did indeed make a decision for someone. So in a sense, he took away their free will in that particular case. But I want to be clear, this shows that Maruki will only make a choice for you if he believes there's too much pain in the path you originally choose. For example, the character we are talking about was in a depressive state while pursuing his dream. I'm still not saying that justifies it. All I'm trying to do is put things into more balanced view. So you don't have to worry about losing all free will, because even in Maruki world, you would still be able to wake up and choose to put pineapple on your pizza if you want to. So does a world without suffering mean a world with no conflict? Remember the earlier point that while suffering makes you stronger, do you ever need to be strong if there's no more hardship? I personally think this point is a reminder for us to step back and look at Maruki's power, because while Maruki has the ability to change cognition and remove pain, does that really guarantee a world with no conflict? Let's speak in a micro sense first. If there's two parties and let's say they both want the same things or want something that conflict with each other, how would Maruki world solve this? Because the party that doesn't get what they want is going to end up in pain, and if they want that thing a lot, possibly in chronic depression. The answer would be more cognition changes, and since we all share one world, there's going to be more conflict of interest. That means more cognition change, which in a sense bring the world closer and closer to being less free will orientated, which I'm sure is something most people value. That said, in this case, some people might still be happy and choose to sacrifice a portion of free will for a world with no pain and low conflict. However, if it's possible for the Phantom Thief to oppose Maruki, and considering how the Persona and SMT universe are full of powerful entities, I personally don't think there's ever a guarantee for a world that doesn't need strength. There's really no guarantee that someday another god won't appear, dislike what Maruki did, and comes to challenge his throne. So, despite how I don't think the developer treated the two worlds as equal in the narrative, I do think the question is an interesting one. In reality, we can't get rid of pain, so the conclusion that we must learn to live with it and understand that it has value is a wonderful lesson. What is my answer then? Well, honestly, it's going to depend on how you frame the question, but nowadays I realize there are many things that are more interesting to observe and understand from other people's points of views than to find an absolute answer. And this is definitely one of them. That said, let me tell you one thing I have observed to be absolute. And that is whether you agree or disagree with Maruki, I can see that all of us want the world to be a better place. And that, I think, is the most beautiful things about all of this. Thank you for watching and being part of the communities.